From the Van Aken District, Market Hall in downtown Shaker Heights, we are the Fabulous Boomer Boys. I'm Bob Snyder, and this is my friend since the 4th grade, Bruce Bogart, and we want to welcome you to Shaker Heights for this program.
Right.
How come whenever I say you, they start applauding again?
Let me tell you something right now, Bob. We've been friends since the 4th grade,
Right.
but I think there was 1 year that we didn't have much contact, so I don't know if the continuation rule works or not. I'm not sure. But before we go any further, listen, I want to thank Gail Rotman-Schwartz for filling in for me 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago. I would appreciate that. And I'm glad to be back.
Well, I'm glad to have you back. I did miss you. But I have to admit, Gail, some of you were here then. I think you'd have to admit Gail did a really nice job.
All right.
And she did her research.
So is that a
but
shot?
anyway,
Is that a shot at me?
anyway, but she was very good.
No,
I'm just telling you, she did her research.
Listen,
Nothing to do
I've
with
been
you.
criticized because he says I don't research the show. Now, Dean Martin didn't show up for rehearsals when he had his show.
And
Dean
he was
Martin
great.
didn't want, and remember what happened to Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. So be careful.
So
That's
I
all I
agree.
got.
You know what? And at this point, I'd say keep not rehearsing.
Okay.
Okay, good. All right. So we have a real special guest tonight, a repeat guest in that our earlier days when we were at Corky and Lenny's, you might recall those days. When we used to do the show there, and we expanded so that we could fit more people in, because we loved Corky and Lenny's, right? We still continue to go there to eat food, but the audience participation is a little easier here for a larger group. But anyway, before I introduce my guest, I do want to...
Our guest.
Our
guest.
Yeah, I know. Okay. Before we introduce our guest, my friend, I want to advise everybody that because of his background, we do have tonight, if we could show our security person back there, Anthony, if anybody is carrying a concealed weapon, please check it in with Anthony, as we want to make sure tonight we don't have any issues because, of course, Rick's past and his current situation as an author. So, without further ado, as they say in the big time, we're going to introduce to our guest. He most recently is known to a number of you possibly because he was the former police chief of the city of Lyndhurst. Bruce?
That's right.
Right? I know you've seen him in the courtroom probably on occasion.
I don't know too many people will admit they know it from that way because
right.
it's not cool,
Yeah, but he has been there. And more importantly, and I got to put on my glasses so I make sure I read these titles correctly, Rick is also an author and a playwright. And in particular, I think his most famous book, a lot of you have probably even seen the movie, it was To Kill the Irishman. The rise and fall of the Cleveland Mafia basically happened because of this book, To Kill, and we can see, if those of you want, you can see the book over there, which is available for sale. And it's really the story of Danny Green, the mobster that got blown up at the corner of Cedar and Brainerd. I see people walking through here, they go, oh, Danny Green, everybody remembers that, Cedar and Brainerd. Well, tonight we're going to talk about his latest book, which there also is, and we'll talk to him about this, some possibilities about a movie happening about this. And the name of that book is Bombs, Bullets, and Bribes, the true story of notorious Jewish mobster Chandra Burns. Please welcome Rick Porello.
Thank you,
Why
Bob.
don't you step in there, Rick?
Hi, Bruce.
A returning letterman.
Well, the first time you were on, Rick, we were talking about what's your next book you're going to be writing about, and you mentioned that it was going to be about Chandra Burns.
Yeah.
And truthfully, being an East Side situated program, although we have people watching us tonight in South Africa, as you know, Bruce, Alan Weeder, watching it in Johannesburg, and people in Florida, Will Hendricks is watching in Texas, on and on.
Get going.
Anyway, we do tend to kind of go after the East Side crowd here. They seem to be our biggest fans. So Chandra Burns really fits into that, being that that's kind of his territory, was the East Side of Cleveland.
I would say,
Yeah.
but he was known all around town, I would say.
And the biggest thing about Chandra Burns was the fact that in his day, organized crime figures kind of led a quieter life, whereas Schonder, he was out there in the public.
He was the antithesis of what a mobster should be in that regard. He loved the publicity. He loved newspaper reporters. He'd sit down with them. He'd pick up the tab for the large coffee. He would.
Bruce, you're telling me Bruce didn't get that? Oh, okay. It's all right. It's okay.
He loved to be in the headlines and in the newspapers, and he was oftentimes in the newspapers and headlines. They say that some reporters actually made their careers covering Schonder Burns and his exploits.
Were some of his mob friends jealous of his publicity, so to speak?
I think, if anything, it might have annoyed them because it brought attention to the organization, and that's not really what they wanted. It was supposed to be a secret organization, but some of these bigger-than-life characters like Schonder Burns or Danny Green, they didn't care about that, and that's really the reason why I decided to write about him.
Well, you mentioned that secrecy. I want to talk about that right off the bat, and that was something you have really in all of your books about the mafia. Is they had this term, I think it was omerta?
Omerta,
right? So that's where he was the opposite of other gangsters, because if you were in the mafia or had to do something with the mafia, tell us a little bit about what that omerta is.
Well, omerta is basically the Sicilian code of silence, punishable by death. You know, you got to keep the secrets within the organization. You don't testify against anybody. You don't talk about what is going on within the organization. If you violate that, or if you testify, or if you're a confidential informant and you get outed, you could wind up dead, and that happened plenty of times.
But he was not a made man. Right?
No, he couldn't be a made man
He
because he wasn't Italian or Sicilian, but he was still a respected and feared member of the organization.
Okay, now, the biggest way I remember Schonder Burns was that he was involved in the numbers, what they call the numbers racket,
Yes.
right? And I don't think a lot of people, maybe I'm wrong, understand how those numbers worked, what that was all about.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to realize that because, we have something today called the lottery. Am I right?
Yeah. And the numbers racket was the
Tell us how that
illegal precursor to the state lottery. There were two games. The one that was more popular was called Policy, and that was the winning numbers for that game were selected from a bag of little tiny balls, either 78 or 100 balls. They would put them into a bag, shake the bag up, and then the puller would select the winning numbers. Now, the problem with Policy is it was very easy to cheat. Very popular in 20s, 30s, 40s, and then a little bit into the 50s. It was very easy to cheat. One of the things that they did, I don't know if we could show that picture. If you find that picture, it'd probably be in the first photo layout. Yeah. They would shave the balls flat. They would have two sets of balls, a regular set and then an altered set that would be shaved on one side.
Well, here it is for the audience. I don't know if Muhammad could get a picture of this, but go ahead. I don't want to.
And they would take, depending on how many people bet certain numbers, the operator would put either the shaved balls inside of the bag so that they would be pulled. And the whole objective was to not pay out on the numbers that were played, that were bet on the most, because that would mean they'd have to pay those winners out. Another way they cheated is they would heat the balls, put them in the oven for 15 minutes, or put them in the freezer for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then they'd put them in the bag, and then the puller would know. And this would typically be happening on the front lawn of a policy house, just like this, with a crowd of 200 people, just like here, hoping that they would win the number. They'd hit the number. In the meantime, the puller would reach into the bag, and you, as the crowd, would not know that he's reaching in and pulling out or avoiding the balls that were cold, the balls that were heated, or the balls that were flat. So it was easy to cheat. And then the next game was Clearinghouse.
All right, Clearinghouse. Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to say this too. With the fact about the balls and how they get, the state lottery does not do that. I don't want them coming back after me.
No, but as
Okay.
long as you brought that up, there is a rumor that the NBA lottery has some issues with what they.
Oh, well, there's no doubt when the New York Knicks got Patrick Ewing
And we got LeBron.
and we got LeBron, that was fixed.
So we know they're heating
We all
those
know
balls.
that. I mean, I
All right,
I know we have the police chief here, but I think that's common knowledge. But okay, so going back to the next game.
Clearinghouse,
Clearinghouse.
which was became much more popular starting in the 30s, 40s. Clearinghouse got more popular. Policy got less popular as a lottery game. Very difficult to cheat in Clearinghouse because they selected the winning number based on the daily stock market and bond market results. The advances, declines in unchanged columns. You had a certain way of lining those numbers up, and that would be the winning 3-digit number, either the stock market or the bond, depending on which game you play, the stock game or the bond game. And almost impossible to cheat. So Clearinghouse became a much more popular game.
And of course, we all know how fixed the stock market is. So you're still looking at what's going on there, right?
But the public didn't know that the odds were being shaded at all. They were just happy to play. Gambling was hard to do, so gambling was gambling, right?
Well, they take a chance. You know, they bet as little back in the 20s and 30s. This could be a nickel bet, a dime bet, and they take a chance on winning $5, $10, $15, $20, and then.
Now, his life ended in the 70s, but in the 50s and 60s, were they still doing numbers on the streets?
Yes, sure.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and even when the lottery came out in 1973, 1974, Clearinghouse and the illegal lottery operators, guys like Virgil Ogletree and Richard Drake, their operations continued because there was certain benefits to playing the illegal game. Number one, the odds were better.
Right. Well, I'm going to stop you just for a second because we got to run through some of this stuff.
Yeah.
I want to get to the killings. But before we get to that, when you talk about the numbers game, and you mentioned how it was only a nickel or a dime or whatever to bet, a lot of that was going on in the poorer neighborhoods.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So what happened and how Chandler helped me after reading the book, Bruce, I know this. The numbers games were in minority neighborhoods where unfortunately people didn't have a lot of money, and but they could bet a nickel and they could get themselves perhaps out of poverty.
The earliest operators, the biggest operators, were black.
Right.
They were the biggest in operators of policy, and then Clearinghouse also was very, very popular in the black communities, but not unpopular in the white communities.
No, but what happened was Chandler was the kind of guy that he made friends with the black operators.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, that's where
he
he
made
was
friends with everybody.
Well, that's where he was different than from the Italian mafioso guys you see on the Untouchables.
Right. As long as you were loyal to him, and you could have some place within his organization, you had some talent, busting heads or talent for money or whatever it might be, then he held you dear within his circle.
And let me give you a name of a guy that most of you I think will have heard of, that he became great friends with and worked for him, and Don King.
Yeah. They didn't start as friends.
No.
They didn't start as friends.
But Don King, who did get convicted and went away.
Yeah.
And before he was with Muhammad Ali and all those boxing promotions, he was a numbers king.
Right. Yeah. He was known as a young man as Donald the Kid. Donald the Kid King.
And when Donald got out of jail, Bruce's good friend James Rose.
Donald did not serve time.
Oh, he never served time?
No, I don't think Donald served time.
I know in your book you said that he did get a pardon from Governor Rhodes, who would not let Bruce into law school.
I take that back. That was not for numbers. It was actually a manslaughter.
Yeah, but it was a crime.
It was a crime. He did serve. I take that back. He did serve some time.
He had one bad day.
And he was eventually pardoned.
One bad day, he had manslaughter, right? But Don King and Chandler did end up becoming very tough.
They started off as foes, but they eventually became friends. Yeah.
So, just for people here to kind of put your head around this, when you watch some of these things, and like they had this new movie called The Irishman, They Stole Your Title. The new thing here with Scorsese's movie.
I don't think they stole my title.
Yeah, but they show, and in The Godfather and The Untouchables, they talk about all these Senate hearings and things like that.
Yep.
Chandra Burns was one of those people they brought up in front in one of those hearings that were done here in Ohio.
Here in Cleveland, yeah.
Right?
Yep. The Kefauver Senate hearings, yeah.
And, you know, the other thing was that we think of this life being so glamorous all the time. Chandra Burns was hounded by the police.
He was. He
I'm
was
not saying we
hounded
should feel sorry for him,
at,
but
at
he
all
was.
levels of law enforcement, local, county, state, federal. He was hounded, and that's one of the things I like about this character. And of course, now I always look at the theatrical potential to the story, whether it be a motion picture or whether it be a series, perhaps. He had a lot of challenges. You know, within his organization, he had upstarts who wanted to maybe take over the organization.
Danny Green.
Danny Green was one of them. Mervyn Gold, a con man, had him backed into a corner at one point. Tommy Boyce, one of his enforcers, wanted to take over. And but he also had various law enforcement agencies because he was convicted of skimming from his nightclub. So he got a conviction for that, served some time, but then he owed back taxes. It never really paid that off. So he had the IRS after him. He was never a citizen when he was brought to the U.S. as a infant.
Can
And
you
for
imagine,
some
with
reason,
all we're hearing about today, with what's going on in politics, with people coming in here and how they're holding him at the border? Chandra Burns was somebody they tried to send back, right? He was originally from Hungary. And then he
they
came
tried
here.
to deport him. Yeah.
Yeah, they tried to deport
and that's
him.
a battle he fought with Immigration and the Naturalization Service, the INS. That's a battle he fought. Of course, the local cops, the Cleveland Police Department, Carl Daylau, always trying to put him get him convicted, put him in prison for gambling and for certain murders that occurred that they believe he was responsible or his enforcers were responsible.
This is a quote from your book that I think is great. Chandra Burns was Cleveland's most, let me make sure I get this right, most arrested and least convicted racketeer.
Right. That was a title. That's not, I didn't make that up. That's a title that they gave him in the newspapers.
That makes him a winner in my book.
Well,
Yeah, right.
Well, if you think about it,
for a period of time.
I mean, he chose his profession.
Yeah.
So he did well in his profession.
And he also dealt a lot with corruption within the system.
Yeah, unfortunately, some of your brother policemen
there was a certain
were on his
hypocrisy.
payroll.
Yeah. The police, even judges. There were certain judges back then. They call them fixed judges.
Sheriff McGettrick.
Yeah, James McGettrick. He was one of them. Yep.
What I have to tell you, and I don't want to forget to say this, what's also so great about this book, lots of times when you read these books, they mention all these people's names, and you wonder, where are they now? I have to hand it to you. Rick, after the book, tells you the main characters where they are today, or most of them underground, but what happened to them, including...
Yeah, but do you notice that they're all either dead or missing? Am I right?
Well, that's why we have
That's true.
Anthony here tonight,
That's
because
true.
some of them have relatives around, Rick, do you get...
Well, that's true. Yeah,
Have you ever gotten a death threat? Have you ever gotten a
I never got a death threat. I've had people that were not happy with what I've been doing, but that actually harks back to my first book, which was about my family.
Right.
And there were some members of the family that weren't thrilled about regurgitating all that happened within the family, and I understand it. I get it. There was a lot of bloodshed back then, so I tried to be as sensitive to that as I could be, and I always try to be sensitive to that.
Let's get to a couple of the names people recognize, maybe. Of course, obviously Danny Green, who got blown up at Cedar and Brainerd, right? But before Danny Green got blown up, there was a number of attempts on his life. We talked about that on the last show, when you were here 6 months ago, okay? But Chandra Burns was also the one that was getting threats, and eventually he got blown up before Danny Green, right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, there was a conflict that developed between the two. First of all, Danny Green was a mafia associate, brought into the fold as an enforcer, primarily by Frank Brancato,
But he was an Irishman, not an Italian or a Jew.
Right, but you didn't have to be an associate.
Okay.
If you, like I said, if you had a talent, whatever it might be, if you were, hitman or an enforcer or both, or you made money gambling, whatever, then you became associated with them, and you were in their favor. But Danny started as an associate and as an enforcer for Frank Brancato, who was one of the mob bosses in Cleveland, and for Chandra Burns. Right. And when Chandra was convicted, I forget what it was, bribery, I think, in the late 60s. Yeah, late 60s. He had to serve about 3 years in prison. Now, he had his numbers operation going, so he brought Danny in to show him how things operated, took him around daily, introduced him to people, so that when Chandra went to prison, because he knew that was coming up, Danny would run his operation and take
not
care
only
of
did he
things
run
for
his
him.
operation, he ran his woman. Right?
Yep.
He went after Chandra's girlfriend.
Right, which I didn't find that out until I researched this book. So
Right.
there's still information that was coming in. Yeah, that was surprising when I heard that. So basically, when Chandra came out of prison, 1971, 72, Danny Green was out of a job. Danny Green.
And he was out of a girlfriend too.
Yeah.
There's always a woman behind this. It's
he had plenty.
It's either
He had
religion,
plenty.
money, or women.
Yeah.
All of these things. Yeah.
I'm
He
sure
didn't
he had
kill
others.
him. He wasn't killed over a woman.
Well,
He
you
was killed
don't know
over
that.
money, right?
Well, yeah.
Turf?
Yeah. Primarily money. And that money was a loan that Chandra provided to Danny, and the money was lost.
Right.
The money was lost, and whether it had to do with opening up a nightclub or it had to do with drugs, I'm not absolutely sure. It was one of those two things.
75 grand or something like that?
75,000. The money was lost, and they basically blamed each other. And then they started going after each other, putting a bomb on his car, and there was a very well-known, or very prolific hitman by the name of Bob Bogus, who was not known, really wasn't on the radar screen.
He didn't go to Brush, did he?
I don't know that he went to Brush, but I think he might have been from the Mayfield Heights area.
Mayfield Heights area.
Of course
okay.
he did.
Yeah, same thing. All right, good. Yeah.
So he basically had the contract to get rid of Danny Green, and there were a couple of attempts made, but then Bob Bogus was killed. There was a shootout, he was killed, and then basically Danny Green won that war, and Chandra was killed in 1975.
No, he wasn't just killed. This is unbelievable. I mean, they found pieces of his penis a block away, right? I mean, these guys were not.
They found pieces big and small. Now, I personally would
Well,
not have.
How many pieces? How many pieces of his penis could there have been altogether?
Well, I don't know.
I was not going to say the word penis, but since Bob did,
Well, I mean,
and
I
it's
don't,
your
what else
show,
is-
so
Let me tell you, it's his show. It's his show.
It is what it is.
now it's his show.
Absolutely his show.
Well,
Before it was both of you.
it is what it is. I mean, where did this happen on the west side, though?
West 25th in Detroit.
Yeah, God forbid they should blow him up in Shaker Heights,
Yeah.
right? You know, they did it on West 25th.
Well, it was definitely overkill. You know,
Yeah.
he was definitely overkill. They didn't need that much of an explosive in the car, but he was killed absolutely instantaneously. Would have never had any idea what hit him.
And you wonder why now today people got these cars where you can start them before you go out? It's because of these bombings.
The only
Cleveland
one I
was a
know,
bomb city.
The only one in the world I know that has that starter on his car is Bob Snyder.
You got to worry about that. You know, I used to. work-
back
You
then
should
they-
have one on your car.
Back then, they did worry about it. Yeah.
They did, right?
Yeah.
Do you have one on your car?
I don't.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, all right. But now, so Chandra got blown away.
He did.
Big time.
He did.
He got big time. But then they went and got Danny.
Then they went and got Danny. Yep.
I mean, that's
somebody very close to Chandra made an initial attempt. That was the bombing on Waterloo, in which his very tiny apartment building and his office underneath was blown up and leveled, and he was in there with his young girlfriend, and they both were relatively unscathed.
But then he got blown away at Cedar and
Then he
Brainerd,
was actually
coming
killed.
back from the dentist,
Yeah,
right?
was killed in Lyndhurst. Yeah.
Rick, is there a message in that they always kill them with bombings, like, as opposed to, why not just shoot them?
Well, they were afraid to get that close, I think, and the idea too, a bomb you could set off from a distance. They were starting to use remote controls. John Nardi killed with a remote control bomb. Danny Green killed with a remote control bomb. And then they weren't planning the bomb on the car. They were planning it on what they call a Joe Blow car, a car registered to a fictitious owner. And then the only challenge then was to be able to park that car next to the victim's car.
So that they could get
So he would die in the.
That's how Danny Green went, right?
That's how Danny was killed.
So let me ask you a question. So let's assume you're going away to college, and you're told your roommate is either going to be Danny Green or
Chandra Burns?
Chandra Burns. You know the two of these people rather well from all your research and writing.
Yes.
Who would you rather have as your roommate at college?
Wow. Bruce, that's a tough question. I don't know.
When you do your research, you come up with these questions. That's the point.
This is
Well,
what
seriously,
happens.
but see, I'm very serious. You know both of these people. You know their characters. You know they
Yeah.
both had.
I don't think I'd want anything to do with them business-wise. I mean,
Either one,
naturally,
right.
as a writer, I would have loved to have been able to sit down and interview them.
Oh, God.
And probably both of them would have sat with me
Yeah.
and talked to me. But no, definitely wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to be in their
Because
live
we're
in their
we're
houses.
starting to run out of time. Are you guys loving this? I mean, you can tell I love this stuff. I mean, if you like The Godfather, or The Untouchables, or Casino, any of those movies, you gotta love reading. You're gonna love reading this book. I mean, it's because the difference between all of those, he's got in the back here factual indications of who he talked to, or I mean, this is
The notes. Yeah,
he's
the
got
notes
notes.
section. Yeah.
It's all
This
backed
is
up.
real.
Yeah.
This really happened. So I decided I ought to do a little research of my own about some of these people that you wrote in the book. And I couldn't believe it. I'm sitting at the Chicago Deli in Solon, if you've ever been there, and I was talking to somebody about your book. All right. And by the way, they didn't show up tonight. I was hoping they were going to. And the person I was talking to about the book, a woman sitting next to me wearing a United States mail outfit. I'm assuming she worked for the post office, but who knows. All of a sudden, she says to me, I heard you talking about Danny Green. I said, yeah, remember he got blown up? She says, my daughter married his son,
Oh, wow, interesting.
and they now live in Lake County, Lake or Ashtabula County. She didn't want to be specific, but his name is not Green. He changed his name to Kelly. So, I mean, small world? Is that small? Yeah. Why do you think it's Kelly? I'm sure because have you heard that his son is in town?
Yeah.
Oh, you did hear? Okay, so
Yeah.
back me up.
And it doesn't have anything to do with the color, actually.
Well, what is it?
Green Kelly.
Right,
Well,
right.
why-
Kelly Green, right.
Well, is
No,
what-
there's actually a name connected to the family.
Name connected. So you knew that he's around.
Yep.
So is he worried about someday somebody wants to?
No,
No
he's
revenge?
not worried about anything. No, he's
not.
a good guy. I know. I'm acquainted with him. Good guy, and he's not worried about anything. I can tell you that.
Okay. Now I met another person who lived on Judson, which is where Chandra Burns
Yeah.
lived before he moved to Orange Village. That's right. He lived in Orange Village, and we know who was the big mafia guy who lived in Pepper Pike.
Mervyn? Well, there were a few. There were that whole
well,
area.
not like Avoli. He was in Little Italy. but-
John Scalish was in that area.
Scalish lived out in Pepper Pike. But anyway, so this person lived on Judson before he moved to South Euclid. And he was telling me, and I know this, I can corroborate this because your book talks about Chandra's Doberman pinchers, which were like his protection in his house.
Yeah.
So this guy told me he lived in a neighborhood, and the interesting thing about the Doberman pinchers, he said, if an adult got anywhere near them, the dogs would pretty much let you know you better stay
Yeah,
away.
yeah.
But children in the neighborhood were welcome. Did you ever hear that story?
The dogs
Yeah.
were very well trained. They were specifically trained as guard dogs.
Yeah, and
They would follow his second wife Ellie through the house. She went into the bathroom,
the dog would
lay
be
down
there.
outside the door until she came out.
Yeah.
And they made more than one visitor, more than a few visitors to the Burns household a little bit
nervous, yeah.
because they would sit down and if they shifted in their chair a little bit, the dog would look up, the ears would go up.
And guess what Chandra gave away for Halloween treats? Money. Silver dollars.
Really?
Silver dollars he gave away. That kind of fits his persona, wouldn't you say? Instead of
Instead
Snickers, he gave away
you could
silver
be
dollars.
describing Danny Green but Danny Green was more of a protege of Chandra Burns. So they had similar personalities, but Chandra, I think, was giving away 50-cent pieces and silver dollars first, but Danny Green did the same thing.
Now, another place we have to talk about just a little bit is the theatrical. How big a part that played in it. I see somebody out there in the audience. Stan, I know you used to go to the theatrical and hang out and sold your stocks and bonds there. But the theatrical was one of these places they hung out. And, you know, we mentioned that he was a Jewish mobster, and it was owned by a Jewish family. Mm-hmm. And they would sit, Chandra would, in certain places so he could just be there and talk to everybody, right? His personality.
He had some favorite seats. And he was there often. At one time, he owned a part of it for a short time.
Yeah, that's something I didn't know. He actually owned part of the
for a short time until the owner brought in, I believe, his son-in-law, maybe, or son-in-law, I believe. And then Chandra eventually went on to own the Alhambra nightclub at about 103rd and Euclid.
Well, Bruce and I went to our senior prom, the dinner for our senior prom, at the theatrical. Yeah. I mean, that was like the place to go. Mm-hmm. And, you know, little did we know at that time, in 1967, that still was a hangout for the...
legendary place within the city in general, but certainly within the city when you talk about organized crime.
There was one other guy I don't want to forget to mention because I think a lot of people on the east side may be familiar with Mervyn Gold.
Mervyn Gold.
And he was one of these guys that got whacked, as they say.
Great character.
Yeah. Now, he wasn't blown away, though, right?
No.
They did eventually. Did they find his body? I think they did.
Trunk of a car.
They did. Yeah.
Right. Yep. They found his body, but he was like one of these guys that would loan money, right? Is that what his?
Yeah, that was one of the things he would do. He was a financial con man, you might say. And he was useful to guys like Chandra Burns and his circle because he made short-term loans, $1,000, $5,000.
And I think he had a family member become actually a very respected attorney in town, if I'm not mistaken.
That I'm not aware of.
Okay.
Well, let me ask you, Bob?
It's hard to say respected attorney because he's an attorney, but go ahead. Yeah.
Bruce has a question.
Oh, yes,
please, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm just into this.
You know, I'd like to, from what I'm hearing, Chandra Burns didn't kill anyone. He was a money man, right? He was a numbers guy, right?
Well, you haven't heard maybe yet that he hadn't killed anyone,
but he wasn't known for that.
I believe he killed.
He might not have pulled the trigger.
You didn't call him a prolific hitman.
No, I did
not. That guy
whose
name began with B.
But it's the same thing if you're responsible for the murder.
Well,
essentially
now
the
you're
same
talking
crime.
law. Let's not talk law. Let's just talk about, as a practical matter, he didn't kill anyone. He was responsible for other things. He was an upper manager.
I think he may have killed. Now that
we don't know.
It's not like we could convict him in court, but I believe he actually.
Remember, he was the most arrested and not committed.
Okay,
convicted.
not convicted. And let's talk. Well, here's my point. My question is this, because you know when you watch The Godfather, when you watch The Sopranos, I think what set them aside was that these people were personal. They had personal lives too, and you notice the personal side. So, did Chandra Burns have any friends that weren't in the business that he would just play cards with as couples?
Yes, he did. He liked hanging out with regular folks. You know, regular Jacks and Jills. I think that my theory is that occasionally he'd like to get away from the circle of criminals and the wannabes that wanted to get involved with him and
it strikes me he wasn't a bad guy. You gotta.
Oh my God, he wasn't a bad guy.
Business is business, you know. I mean,
this is a lawyer, a defense lawyer talking.
No,
this is
business, Bob.
You know, from all
seriousness, judge you by how you sell steel. So come on.
Okay, guys, break it up here.
Right.
Listen, from the point of view of a writer, you want your character to have different dimensions. So that's a good point that you bring up. He was liked by a lot of people. He was he was a nightclub operator. He was a greeter at the theatrical. And
you don't want to owe him any money, though.
No. That's a different thing.
I'm going to Ohio State tomorrow. I'm not living with Stuart Fenton. I'm living with this Chandra Burns.
I wouldn't do that. There were people that were curious about him and that were fascinated to be in his presence.
Right.
Okay? But then if you talk about the business end of things, not a good guy. Not a good guy.
All right, I've got to show some, I think slipped out. I want to show a picture just who we're talking about, this guy. You can see how he's aged over the years with his different, you know, the thing I like about him, he's always wearing a hat.
He
Always one of these
always dressed,
fedoras.
yeah.
Oh, can we get that?
Always dressed sharp.
Oh, changing the batteries on
Occasionally
the camera.
wearing a hat, especially in the old days.
We got Muhammad in filling in for Tyler. He's changing the batteries. I'm going to show the pictures. Okay, it's all right, no problem. Then we'll let those of you here see it. Buy the book. Buy the book and you can see these pictures. They're amazing, really. Where'd you had to dig these up from someplace, didn't you? You know.
That represents 11 years of work, that book. 11 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what are you going to do about the movie?
Thank
What are you
you.
going to do about
Thank
the
you.
movie?
Who are you going to cast as Chandra Burns? You get the book.
Don't know yet, but you keep saying movie. You keep saying movie. Now here's what's happening.
All right.
And it's a little bit, it's a little bit of a gamble, a little bit of a throw of the dice, but I think we have a great opportunity. I've been working with a co-writer. Her name is Danielle Alberico. She's written screenplays before. We are working on a pilot for a miniseries.
Oh.
And maybe. Andy Garcia could be.
He's too tall. I think you need a shorter guy.
So we hope to have a pilot done.
Maybe you need a guy that's like about 5'7", that, you know, you can make look younger like they did in that movie with De Niro.
Digital
right?
reverse aging, right?
Yeah, okay, but
So we're excited to be working on that, and maybe in 4 or 6 months we'll have a pilot, and we'll be looking for investors. So if anyone has $5-10 million out there, raise your hand, Bruce.
We'll think about it.
And it doesn't have to be one person; it could be 5 of you with $1 million each.
Oh, well now, Bruce.
That make it a little easier.
Well, that sounds great. Let me ask you this. Got to change the subject for 1 second. Do you miss the police department?
I do, absolutely.
The whole career there.
I absolutely do. Yeah, mainly I miss the people that I worked with. I really do.
Well, you had a great force, really.
Yeah, we did. We had a wonderful police force.
When's the last time you heard anything bad about the Lyndhurst Police Department? You don't.
We lived there for 20 years.
Yeah, we live.
There you go.
From the audience, one of our peanut gallery guys. But it's true. It was a great, great.
Yeah.
I lived in Lyndhurst for many years.
Wonderful community to live in. Great police department, fire department, and
great
the city
services.
officials. Yeah, I do miss it.
I bet you do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure.
I wish we had more time, but the batteries went out on one camera, so we better, gonna have to wrap it up a little.
I got I need my 30 seconds.
No,
at the
you
end
got
of the
more.
show.
Go ahead.
All right.
That's why I gave a warning. I do want to. I'm going to show the book again, and it's really a good read. I'm not going to say an easy read because there's a lot of names, and you want to keep track of the people in it. So you do want to concentrate. It's not a comic book. Okay. Where can you get the book?
Any local Cleveland bookstore should either. Well, actually, you could get the book here tonight.
Tonight you can get the book.
But any local Cleveland bookstore should either have it in stock or they can order it. And I'd encourage you to go to your neighborhood bookstore to do that. I know Max Bax in Cleveland Heights and Coventry has it. Fireside in Chagrin Falls has it. And in Lakewood, the bookshop in Lakewood on Madison, I believe they have it. I'll have a book signing coming up there.
You think it'll sell as good on the west side as it does on the east side?
It's doing great in the city. It's hard. I don't really have a breakdown of east versus west, but it's doing well. And then if you're inclined to shop online, it's online too.
Yeah. So we just touched the surface here. There's some great details in here. I think if those of you watching it on YouTube, tell your friends about this one because I think they're really gonna want to hear about some of the things you have to say. It's been great. Bruce?
Yeah, I want to say this. First of all, I had the pleasure on a marginal level of knowing our guest before we did our show years ago. And he's a class act and still is. He's a great man.
Thank you.
And I really mean that. And
Thank you, Bruce.
You've never heard me say this in all the shows we've done. The first thing I'm going to do as soon as the cameras go off is I'm going to buy the book because I enjoyed this conversation and now I want to read the book. So thanks for coming out. And I'll give it back to my boss.
Thank you.
I already got my copy, but anyway, he sent it to me. So I'm sorry.
Benefits of the
You
position.
could have offered me one time in all these weeks, say, Bruce, would you like the book?
You could have flipped for it.
Yeah, could have flipped.
Yeah. It's a book about gambling.
Well, we voted and he broke the tie.
That's right. Well, anyway, thank you all for coming. We are going to ask everybody that's watching on YouTube to please make sure you put like and hit us. We have hit, for those of you that haven't seen a show lately, We have over 10,000 views on our show, and I think we can honestly say, Bruce, we are now Northeast Ohio's most popular baby boomer webcast. And it's all thanks to all of you.
And one more request. On my Facebook page, I will be posting the link to this show. We will also have it on a Fabulous Boomer Boy Facebook page. If you enjoyed the show, share it with your friends. Let people know about this man's book. That's all I got.
All right, and Bruce, when we go off the air, I'm going to one story to tell you about Sandy Cater. Remember her?
Yeah.
From high school? Well, she has a connection to Shonda Burns too, and I'll tell you about it later. And if you read the book, you'll see her name in there.
And by the way, one more thing, I came to say, all those things, Bob, you tell me not to tell anybody over the years, is that omerta? I thought it was the bro code. Is it omerta?
Omerta.
Okay.
Death, Bruce.
I learned. Okay.
Keep it to yourself. Okay. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks from Shaker Heights.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce.